And most people, all you have to do is talk with young people that go from here to go to ISU in classes where some of them, not all of them, made fun of for still believing things. And I said, well, who does that? I know two teachers that laughed at students from here, see, because what they were claiming in class. Of course, they got that in IDS. Well, that didn't mean you converted the teacher nor the teaching situation in that university. That meant they were making fun out of something they thought was rather important. Well, not biblically, that was important, but to that class, because the mindset of those teachers, they had long ago abandoned the worldview that made sense of what they were claiming. They had long ago abandoned that. So a second thing in the Enlightenment is, what did I do with that? Enlightenment, please show up. Here we go. Please show up here. Now the reflection and the rejection of all history. Now that's very important. The Enlightenment was a rejection of history. Now the whole foundation of the Bible, from beginning to end, is history. So this is before the historiographical revolution, but once that's in, the implication is done, but they rejected history in place of, because they didn't place creation in as a historical event. They rejected history and the historical foundation of the faith, but from beginning to end, the biblical faith is historically grounded. So there's a stake in the biblical material for history. It's absolutely imperative, because no one else, no other religion is grounded. Only the Book of Mormons, and it's full of errors, and Islam claim to be grounded in history. Well, what you have to do is test and see if it stands up under now. And I say you have to do that to see if the Bible stands up under criticism. But they're the only three religions in the world's history that I know anything about, or know anybody that knows anything about it, that claims that their religion is historically grounded. Well then, if so, then there's contradiction in three claims, and they're all from God. Well, that creates a strange God, and it creates, history is the main thing. The Enlightenment rejects history as the foundation of the discussion. Where was that? In Western Christian civilization. How could the Enlightenment personnel in this Christian influence reject history as an important category? Because they won't say it in the Enlightenment. By the time we get to the 19th century, we're in historical relativism. You're into multicultural relativism by the 21st century. All these things are coming to pass. They don't come to pass just overnight. They're like Barnard's frog in the beaker. You turn the heat up on the frog, and he's comfortable for a little while, and then he's dead. You turned up the heat. That's what happens with all these changing events in Western civilization. They don't look like they're going to do that much harm, but in just a little while, the impact of their influence will be enormous, enormous. So the rejection is the first thing. And the institutions and traditions inherited from the past, from the Bible, will be rejected. They're no longer going to ground anything in tradition or authority. They're going to ground it in the scientific method. Not traditions, even in a good sense, like Paul said, I've delivered to you the traditions of the gospel. All traditions aren't correct, but anything that's transmitted historically is tradition. There's no question about that. But traditions and authority. Now, science, the scientific method, is going to replace decisions made on the basis of authority. Like, not just, but like the Roman Catholic Church. It was true because the authority structure. Well, science comes along and challenges both tradition, and then you're on the way to existential. The only place left's the future. So then you get into the irrationalism of existentialism, phenomenology, and all the things that develop in the 19th, 20th century just come directly from rejecting that one foundational thing that the Enlightenment did. Now, another thing, the Christian doctrine of man as a sinner was abandoned. And by the time, now that's crystal clear, but by the time we get to Darwin, by the time we get to the developments in the 19th century, that will be crystal clear. Freud will reduce sin to neurosis. It's no longer sin violating God or the Word of God. It's neurosis. That goes into cultural anthropology. Mead and her cohort teachers in Columbia, and in the 30s, and they examined the Samoan culture and found that the missionaries had caused the people to feel guilty. Well, after Freud, there is no guilt, there's only guilt feelings. So you've got to have therapy to remove guilt feelings, because there's no such thing as guilty. Because you haven't violated any cosmic norm, like in the Bible. The norm is arbitrarily transmitted, they would say, in the ridiculous environment of Christianity among these people. So Mead and Benedict and Margaret Mead and Ruth Benedict became the high priests of what comes to be comparative anthropology. And it was all relativism. There's nothing, and that Christianity is responsible for all of the chaos in those cultures. Now, like it or not, almost all, now there are Christian anthropologists, I'm quite aware of that. But the influence throughout the anthropological developments in the university is cultural relativism. Every culture is its own viewpoint. Well, if so, that's technically true, but that doesn't mean that every viewpoint is correct. If it is, then Christianity is what? False. So history gets it, the whole tradition authority factors get it, the fundamental for Christianity, biblical authority, all authorities given me, that makes no sense to the postmodern mind, because truth is not decided by authority. It's decided by the scientific method being applied. So see what happens to these categories, we still talk about them, but our culture has very little positive evaluation of these categories. So we can talk about them just like nothing's happened, but that's like having cancer and being unaware of it. We can still have it without being aware of it. So it's better to be aware of it, but we don't have to be aware of something for it to be the case. That just means our knowledge of that is limited. So the Christian doctrine of man is called in question. The biblical doctrine of history is called in question in the Enlightenment. And science, faith must be the foundation in the scientific method, and society must be grounded in a humanistic, not a biblical or Christian context. So if society had been governed by Christian assumptions broadly in civilization, but as the Enlightenment develops in Christian context, then Christianity, their institutions are no longer to be identified with the biblical models of those institutions, marriage and all those things that come in politics, every institution, economics, politics. Of course, you didn't have the science of economics till the 19th century. You didn't have the science of anthropology to the 19th and 20th century. So they had anthropology, but they never had science, so-called scientific study of these cultures around the world. All these things are Enlightenment category. So we've gone from Dostoevsky's crime and punishment to the crime of punishment. What's going on in Arizona? You know.
The congresswoman who was shot and the other people who were shot as well.
And who's to blame? Now, Rush Limbaugh, you
right.
know, he did it really. But what is what's going on? Who was it just passed? Just come home. Just passed removal of the death penalty for punishment.
The Illinois Congress.
The Illinois Congress. I didn't want to stay out of town long. Just passed it. Was that good or bad? Well, they think that's advancement, but I've heard that before. But they're going from the crime and punishment of Dostoevsky to the crime of punishment. See, nobody's responsible for anything, or we're not certain who's responsible. That's the problem. See, if we were certain, we found 3 people that once DNA was made available, they should not have been executed. So we made a mistake. I have no doubt there have been mistakes. Not the slightest doubt about that. But you do in the whole foundation of a cultural judgment on certain behavior. So if behavior, everybody's behavior is acceptable, then nobody's behavior merits what? Punishment or judgment. Well, that no culture can survive with that. First of all, never has. So here we advanced to the point in the Illinois House that they found. Was that just yesterday? Today they passed. Today. Well, that's it's a criminal act. But anyway, that's just an example of all these influences. You say the Bible? Well, the Bible and these redneck Bible thumpers, well, they're the conservative. They think they know everything, and we're advanced people. We believe the Bible, but we believe different things about it. I've heard that before. So then another technical thing, conscription came in the French Revolution, you know. We had three revolutions, and where were those revolutions? In society, Enlightenment, influences, where, you know that. I'm just playing little games with France. Well, what was France in general, if you'd ask them? Roman Catholic. Well, you got Rousseau, you got all these great minds. What are they? They're rebels with causes, not without causes. And the second revolution is where? United States, time-wise, United States. And then the third is the Russian Revolution. Three revolutions. Well, you don't get revolution until masses of people are dissatisfied with what? They're dissatisfied with the structure. Now, a lot of people grumble, fuss, and faunch. But when you get hundreds or thousands of people that will put their lives on the line for a cause, what are they doing? They're either all crazy, which is dubious, or they're radically dissatisfied with the controlling structure. Well, what structure religiously was in all three of those revolutions? You know.
The church?
Church, Christianity. Well, it looked like Christianity is a failure. So only neurotics, cripples, need religion. You need therapy. You need sedation. You need narcotics, theological narcotics. Well, that's what happens in the culture. Now, most people do not want to hear a series of sermons about sin. Well, sin as a category has been in demise in our culture for over 200 years. The nature of history as the foundation of the truth. If history is relative, I say it's contingent, but everything contingent is not necessarily false. If there's a creation of the universe, I've said this this afternoon, everything in this room is contingent. You don't need God to extrapolate God from the non-contingency declaration of your shirt or that blackboard, but we're talking about the universe. See, that's a different contingency talk. See, it's not just, don't give me examples of finite things that you don't need God to explain. All those are all but self-evident to everybody but grandma. But I want you to explain the universe. I want you to explain the periodic chart. I want you to explain the DNA particle. I want you to explain ultimate grounding of all thought. And then that gets it back way past building rigging a shirt or building a house. You don't need God. So design, the design argument was weak from the start. All of you remember the design argument. Now things are designed, but the finite things don't need an infinite designer. That was the faux pas of the logic in that. We got this thing and we need God. Well, you don't, but you do need God to explain the origin of the universe. That's a different thing. So I will not set you free in the discussion. I don't want to discuss finite things or trees or rhubarb or gooseberries or anything else. I want to discuss, see, that's why creation is the most important thing in the Christian material. I believe that.